We're live.
This is Senate Appropriations, and we've kind of rejiggered our agenda for today, and we're starting with Bill H 850. It's a time-sensitive bill that's come over from the House, and it's been passed as a result of the unintended impact of policy provision that was in last year's legislation that we passed, and we're finding that it's having a very unintended impact on spending decisions. So with that, I'm going to ask the chair of our Senate Finance Committee to run through what this bill does and why it's needed. We're going to do it quite quickly in the sense that I've gotten an emails, you're rushing this through, but the reality is that we have to take fairly swift action considering the timeframes under which we are operating. And the reason we have the bill is there's an appropriation of $500,000 for the Secretary of State to underwrite the potential of the anticipated costs associated with rewarding school budgets and having revotes in light of the current level of proposed spending as we're hearing it. So thank you, Senator Cummings, for coming in so quickly, and turn it over to you.
Okay, and because we're televised, I might be a little longer than I would because I assume everyone here knows some of the background. But when we did the new weighting bill, we knew there would be a cost. We had about 5 or 6 schools in the bottom who were going to lose a significant amount of voting capacity or taxing capacity, and we had 5 or 6 on the top. When it left the Senate, we phased those based on pupil count over 5 years, and you couldn't gain or lose more than 5.
So I guess we should say you were right.
Well, yes.
Thank you.
But when it got to the House, they wanted to give the schools that were the big winners, their money up front, because these were mostly schools that had a lot of English as second language learners. They had been providing all the extra teachers and, programs that go along with that. So they gave them that. And then for the schools that were losing, they phased that in by doing a 5% cap on their tax rate. And when they did this, the latest numbers they had, school taxes traditionally have gone up 3 to 4% a year. And so 5 just said you couldn't go up more than 1% from this for years. This year, school spending is going up on the average of 15%. And if you put a 5% cap and have on your taxes, which are your revenue, and 20% increase in your spending, the system's going to go bankrupt.
Or the non-residential is going to be under besieged.
Yes,
Yes.
that's where the extra money would come from. And that isn't what was intended, and it had the consequence, and there was a tax review board if you went up to 10%. And so we had a lot of schools that were spending to 9.9%, and they thought their taxes were capped at 5%, and they had all this additional spending. So the House, and now we've gone back and said, no, we're going to do a phase in. We never intended to cap spending at 5% when your school spending was going up 15, some of them are up in the 30s this year. That's a problem, and we need to deal with it. But 850 says we will phase it in again over 5 years. This year, if you lost 10% of your taxing capacity, the state will give you a 10-cent credit on your tax rate. So there should be no or minimal effect from this weighting this year, and that will be phased out at 20% a year. So next year there'll be an impact. The rush is to get it out so that schools know what the rules are when they submit their budgets. We have given them until April 15th to do school budgets, some time. If those budgets go down and they have to do it more than once. And then there's the 500,000 appropriation that you have, which we cover the cost since we caused the problem. Because we didn't get it.
Senator Stevens, you have any questions?
Well, I'm concerned that we caused the problem. I guess I'm not clear on how we caused the problem and the school spending didn't cause the problem.
Well, we.
I mean, the school
Yeah.
spending goes up and
Yes.
nobody says schools, slow down. And that's my problem. And somehow I heard, the majority leader state that, because of, it's our fault and we're not gonna do the pay increase this year because it's our fault, that school taxes are going up. And I just wanna
Okay.
understand how it's our fault that
I-
voters are approving 27% increases.
Okay, I will go back to that. We didn't know there was a problem until the December 1st letter got back. By the time we got back here in January, we were already up against the school's deadlines. So by changing the rules, we are causing schools, if they choose, to go back and redo their budgets when they know that they can't spend 9.9% and have their budgets capped at 5%. So we caused the problem of having to ask for revotes.
We didn't do it deliberately. It was an unintended impact that was designed as I've heard it described, to protect those towns that would have been very, very significantly impacted by the weighting methodology. So
I don't disagree with that. I'm
Yeah.
just concerned that we set this, the governor's been putting a lot of emphasis on the legislature has to fix this.
Yeah.
And I never heard him say, schools, you need to reduce your spending, because that's where, in my, ever since Act 60, that's where the issue.
well, not even reduce spending, reduce the increase. No one is
Increase.
talking about,
Well, I meant reduce increases in spending. If you've got a 27% increase, your taxes will go up, but they go up for your neighbor too.
Yes. And the real victims in this are gonna be the towns that didn't go up, that couldn't go up, and they're gonna see an increase in their tax rates if a bunch of other schools go up to 2030. I'm also concerned about people being driven out of their homes.
big time.
Big time.
Yeah, well, I've just Senator Kirchler and then, Senator Lyons.
In finance, did you take testimony on what the increase would be to the non-homestead rate if the cap was in place? People just say it would be everything else, but I can't remember, is that like it would go up 40%? 20%?
Right now, the forecast is that if these budgets go through, the property tax rate will go up 20%.
Right.
It's hard to,
But I'm saying if we kept the 5% cap in all, so with 5% cap, everybody hit the cap in the whole state.
The answer is behind us,
Okay,
and that is with Julia Richter from Drug Fiscal. So can you put yourself on record to answer the question?
it's behind us.
Sure.
Or behind me, it's not
Julia
behind.
Julia Richter, Joint Fiscal Office. The question was, what would rates be if the cap was still to be in place
For the non-homestead.
for the non-homestead? So the latest modeling that we had was when, all school districts hit the cap,
Right.
which meant that, the homestead, average bill increase would go up to 20.59%. And the non-homestead would go up to 22.7%. That's on January 30th, when we did the last round of modeling.
And otherwise, non-homestead would be whatever we said it.
And otherwise, the average bill change could be any direction across the different classes that the legislature would choose to set in the yield bill.
Thank you.
Senator Lyons.
Yeah, okay, do we have a sense, it's probably more for Julia or someone from education, of how schools, individual districts will be affected? I know that we're gonna see sort of the shift.
Yeah.
From benefit to,
we've got charts. I think I've got 3 superintendents coming in, 2 with big increases, 1 without, a more rural district. We can talk about what the different pressures are and why one school is going up 10 and everybody else is going up 20. So we're still working on that. Once we get the rules in place for this election, I think we can then start to work on
Sort it out.
the biggest issue, which is why and is this sustainable? And, has the system just run up as far as it can?
Well, for me, it's also, I understand healthcare, which is just like, we continue to try to tackle healthcare affordability and reduce costs, which is like this huge issue. But the other piece are the ESSER funds that schools have had, and do we have an understanding of how many schools are now prolonging the programs that have come as a result of ESSER? What's happening there? Are those, it's just like so complicated, have those funds then increased expenditures per pupil?
I think the answer is yes, and we have some examples where that
And
is
it's
the
a new
case.
base. And one of my schools, the most vocal one, has removed itself from a union district. It has some tentative ties to it, but because it's gotten itself into a very small group, it's getting a very big hit from 127 because it doesn't have the other smaller, poorer towns to offset it.
Right.
So, yeah, we're pretty sure that some schools are saying, we're only going up 10%, but that 10% is above
Right.
last year's base, which had a lot of ESSER money in it.
And as we sit around here, that was one of the things, as an appropriations committee, we said time and time again, we can't use that money for ongoing to build the base. We can only really devote it to one-time, defined projects, because the money is gonna go away. So it does seem like, just like, I hate to say it, but every department in state government is saying to us, well, we've got those healthcare costs at the same amount, we've got a contract.
Yeah.
And, we've seen the Agency of Human Services come in with an overall 2.9% general fund increase, which is showing, how difficult the budgetary. So I know that some people are saying, well, let's just have another funding source, or maybe the general fund. And the only thing, I'm using this opportunity to say, the general fund is under great pressure, and in fact is inadequate for some of the very things that, we care about, like a functioning judicial system or whatever. So, we understand obviously these factors and the influence of federal money, but sometimes if you have ESSER as part of your base spending from the prior year, then it helps lower that percentage increase. But that exercise doesn't change the reality of what you've got to find in the education fund. So, Julia, did you have another comment in terms of Senator Lyons' question?
The question being,
ESSER fund utilization, how it was used, and then the consequences.
right, so I think that the chair spoke to the
Yeah.
point that some budgets have filled those ESSER positions. The Agency of Education has put forth a survey to get exactly that information, along with other data points such as mental health costs in schools, but is still collecting and cleaning that data.
So my understanding about mental health costs in schools is that that's been through transfer with our DAs and our SSAs.
To some extent.
And to some, and some of it's Medicaid dollars. I don't know how that dovetails with education Medicaid funding, but so all of that information is important, and and it'll be interesting to know if school boards were taking all of those points into consideration. And
I can't answer that question. I do know that some schools actually have hired clinicians. One has hired a psychologist. And of course, that transit, because you're not getting the Medicaid match, so it does translate. But I think Senator Westman, and then I'm gonna keep going because we have a request, and this is something we have to move out ahead of the priority setting for the budget. And if we need to move this forward, and I think everybody is saying that this is a very time sensitive, bill and that, we need to approve the appropriation, to actually execute the intent of the bill. So Senator Westman, you had a comment and then I'll go to.
I would just say in response to your, I was at a school meeting last night. And this is the unified budget for the elementary schools in Memorial North. They're spending from 24 to 25, 15.9 up to 17, about 17.1. The ESSER money that they lost this year was 905,000, about $1 million out of their budget. Their budget going up in total is 7.6%. But if you replace the ESSER funds, it's a 14.9% increase, just about the 15% that everybody's talking here. So, and that's the piece, the general fund piece that falls back on us. And they're replaced, ed fund. And clearly in my district, the biggest increase is because they're replacing the ESSER funds. The second biggest increase was 16.5 in healthcare, and they have a new contract. And those three things, but the new contract and the healthcare really only add up to about 7.6%. The rest is, it doubles because of the ESSER funds.
So that's a good example of what's happening, and these.
It's almost exactly the numbers that they told the state.
So,
And just a quick thing, the discussion of 850 and the progress of it has already had some school boards lowering their budgets in anticipation. So it seems to me a good sign that we're trying to do, which is get to a place that's more manageable with 850 and then keep considering the problem.
well, I think that, right, this is just the first step. And I just want to say, no one has felt the pressure of this any more than Senator Cummings. And the concern is for people that would experience a property tax increase at the level that these budgets would require to be funded, would be impact of thousands of dollars. And the question ultimately for everybody here is those decisions are not made here. Those spending decisions will be made by every town. And one would hope that understanding what that will mean to the residents of their town, because this isn't free money. It's gonna come back, or it could all fall on your, on your small businesses, on your rental. I mean, it's gotta be made somewhere. And I think everybody's kind of weighted down and somehow, and I think this gets to Senator Sears' concern that somehow this is a creation, but even setting aside the weighting, the budgets that, and the spending levels that we're hearing about have, if they are voted in, have got to be funded. And the funding will mean a very, very serious increase on property taxes that are paid by all the property owners, not only in their town, but, throughout the state, because the money isn't free. It's not there, and it's not available to just be moved over from some other, mysterious source. So this is why I guess we need to make it clear, and anyone who's listening, is the level of spending for education is determined by local voters on their local school budgets. We only have to set the tax rate to generate the necessary revenues to support the spending that is voted on locally. And I think this is Senator Sears' concern is with it's that local vote that determines everything that has to follow. And that just seems to be lost in the discussion. But I think, as someone said, higher spending equals the need for higher revenues. Simple as that. It's not It's not complicated, and that's what we're
Well,
seeing.
that's,
So I'm gonna, Senator Westman and then Senator Purchase.
I'm gonna need to get.
I know you do. Do you have OPR waiting or maybe, or,
I don't know.
oh. Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Do you have other questions of Senator Cummings? Because
No.
she does have to get
I
back.
feel
I'll just
bad
tell you,
for-
I have told everybody that your tax rates are going up because your spending is going up. That 850, just, the weighting isn't gonna have any impact this year.
Right.
And, but I'm not sure how we get the message out. I've got another district I've had one email from, and his taxes were going up 40%. I said, well, that's because the spending is going up. But people will vote that in, and that's gonna hurt some people.
Yeah.
Big time.
Well,
Well, John, I have a quick
Yeah,
question.
go ahead.
The appropriation of 500,000, but
That's,
was it just an estimate by the Secretary of State or
yes,
how?
I think that's how it got, and it's just the cost to reprint your ballots, basically.
They just made an estimate
Yeah.
of cost and number of towns I thought were going
Seems suspiciously neat, but.
well, if they don't need it, then we can always,
That's the people who would like to
We'll get
let
it back.
second votes get covered if they
Yeah.
don't change the budget.
Yeah, but in small towns, you get a little piece of paper and you either write yes or no. I mean, there shouldn't be $500,000.
well, of course, they would have to, publicize it. They'd have to warn
Yeah,
it,
you know, it's a
so,
cost. They have to
So,
put it
that-
in publishing.
so
Cheap and
we need to let Senator Cummings go because she's got a committee to,
We're gonna start working on the problem after.
all right, so,
Good luck.
so we
Yeah,
have,
thank you.
a bill that requires funding,
Even if you don't raise.
for the, cost of the Secretary of State. And you had your hand up, so
I was wondering if the chair would entertain a motion.
I certainly would.
In that case, I would move that Senate Appropriations approve H 850 regarded favorably and send it to the floor.
Second? Oh,
Second.
okay. Our clerk is ready.
Any
Further discussion?
question? What is lost with me is the change that doesn't allow us to look at spending over a certain percentage.
You mean the excess spending?
Yeah,
Excess spending is still in place.
So, right, so I think that
The general framework.
there's
So
two
20,
pieces, there's the
Right.
excess spending threshold, there's also the tax rate review board, which you may be referring to.
that's what I'm referring to,
So-
because I've gotten letters from people in Stowe who are very, Senator Purchase constituents who are very upset.
They just suspend.
So Act
127.
127,
Because we just let Julia,
Sorry.
answer the question.
Act 127, the transition mechanism had the 5% cap. It also had the tax rate review board, which essentially said if a district's per pupil spending, when calculated under both formulas, increased by 10% or more from one year to the next, then that district needed to go before a tax rate review board, which would look at their budget and determine if it was for good cause or if it was excessive, that increase in spending. If it was excessive, then the district would not receive the 5% cap. H 850 repeals that tax rate review board because now there's no longer a 5% cap. So there's no decision that needed to be made by the tax rate review board because there's no longer a 5% cap that a district could or could not receive.
The argument from Stowe is that by removing that, you've just added oil to the fire, gasoline, excuse me, to the fire.
Yes, they
I
have,
think there was some misunderstanding of what the 10% review board is. I think they thought it was kind of overall, any spending over 10% was gonna get reviewed and then they could decrease it. But all that board could do is say whether the 5%
But
applied to them or not. And if the 5% is not there, then they
it's
would meet and
irrelevant.
they couldn't do it.
But I thank you for that.
The excess spending thing is different issue.
Yeah, no,
Probably don't.
that wasn't what I was.
Yeah, no, what I'm concerned about.
Senator Baruch thought that's what I was asking.
And I have a question for Julia. So prior to Act 127, there were excess spending provisions in Title 16. I don't know Act 127 or the waiting bill enough to know. Those provisions, I'm assuming, are still in law?
Correct, so there was an excess spending threshold. I would need to do a little bit of digging to pull up the information in front of me, but it is in the green books, it's in statute saying if a district spends above X% of this number.
Yeah.
Then there's a higher tax rate for those dollars they're spending above that threshold.
That's,
And
That was
remains-
first.
And that remains in
No, it still is in the green books, it still is in statute, but it was first, suspended during the COVID-19 years.
Yeah.
And then it was further suspended in Act 127 for fiscal year 24 through fiscal year 2029.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
5-year transition.
Okay, so that also answers your question. That's interesting.
yeah, I guess, I mean,
All right, so yes,
It would just, the excess spending that we're talking about is not what they're talking about at the local level. At the local level, what they will tell you is our budgets are going up somewhere around 7.5%. And they consider the ESSER monies base monies. We don't, we're arguing about that here. So when you talk about excess spending and where they're going with that, from our position at the state level, we're most concerned about that. Half of all of this increase is now these districts trying to make up the ESSER monies. The other underlying budget increases are healthcare and all of the contract and all the things we've named. I'm not sure this does anything to get at that increase based upon the ESSER. And I think that and not to say this isn't a step that should be taken, because I think you've got two categories here. You have a category of district. And Mount Mansfield Union High School was one of them, and we all read the front porch forum post from that, where they put $5.6 million in. They stayed in under the 10, but got over the 5, because they wanted to share those costs out around everybody else. And they have capital construction problems that they wanted to put back. I think this does something about that. I don't think this really does anything in the overall about all of the districts moving the ESSER spending into their overall base. And in my district, which I think is normal, they're saying this is not a 15% increase because they were already spending the ESSER money. And until we can figure something out about getting at that and putting a cap on their spending that tells them that there's going to be penalties if they include the ESSER money in, this is not going to work.
so, yes, Senator Birchall.
I'll support the motion, but I just want to say in my district, I have three school districts that are seeing these huge tax increases, and so they're real concerned. So more numbers to try and figure out how that is and how much is just because of the local spending and their decision. It's just important, and I'm hopeful that the discussion will continue during the session. I don't think this is the vehicle for it, even though I got a lot of emails trying to put all that fixes onto the. So I'm supportive of passing it, but hope that we can get to the other issues during the session.
I think we have to. And I think we're trying to get more data. For example, the governor's always saying our school population has declined very significantly. Our number of school classroom teachers has not, has stayed pretty much. But our wages for classroom teachers are about average, even though our cost of education is one of the top 5 in the nation, might be even be number 1, second in the nation. So a part of this is really, where is that cost growth occurred? Is it, I hate to say it, but in higher education, they're always complaining about bureaucratic bloat. Is it,
Disappointment, yeah.
I know.
well, because,
Whenever anybody uses float.
no, because I hear it from my son, who's on the faculty, saying, look at what we're getting and what's the cost of education. And it's certainly not because of the faculty or the classroom teachers. So the question then becomes, one for us to better understand where has that cost? Workforce has grown tremendously, by double digits. At the same time, there's been declining enrollment, so it begs the question, and hopefully we're gonna start getting a better understanding of around where those cost trends, upward trends have been, what do they look like for what, et cetera. Because right now, I don't think we're capturing the data, we're just struggling with the short term, not to tax Vermonters out of their homes. And we don't have the, other funding capacity, since we're already putting in so many other of the revenues that used to flow into the general fund, into the education fund. So, I guess with that said, unless it's really
Formula
this,
needs work.
yes, it does, or what other thing is better connection of the spending decisions and what is the impact, on who's paying the bill.
Well, and also, are there current programs that have seen their good old times? Time to leave them and move on to what's new. But it sounds like everything new is being added.
It's like Minoan architecture, we keep adding a room at a time, and then we can't, and then we created a labyrinth.
Just, I have to say, I don't really understand what this is doing across. I have, 5 communities that, the superintendent tells me that the vote that we're about to take would, put them in a better place. I have one community that's my largest that says it won't, and I have no way to really tell what this is doing across the board.
Yes, we're putting them right back to where they would have been without this cap, essentially. So they're building a budget and they're deciding spending. And the impact is simply removing the cap. I'm not sure.
But it does the cent discount too.
It does,
The cent discount.
because of the weighting.
Yeah.
That's because of the weighting, which is moving along parallel to this, but it gets obviously all conflated. And that's what the bill does, is at least because the 5% cap that was intended to address those heavily impacted, negatively impacted towns has created this situation that we're in. It's being replaced with a tax discount, I guess is a good way of the term. So it does attempt to mediate that impact of the weighting, but so that it does that as well. So Senator Brewer.
And I was just gonna say, seems to me that in some quarters, there's been an attempt to blame the entire situation on the weighting formula. And if we pass 850, it seems to me that it almost takes weighting completely off the table in terms of what we're talking about. So at the very least, I hope communities wouldn't continue to point the finger at communities who have higher numbers of impoverished folks, language learners, et cetera, as somehow, the cause of their worries, and point them more toward their own budgeting in their own districts, which is really what we're talking.
Must be, was School Boards Association must meet with their school boards and explain to them about using those federal funds to pay bills with and work that right into their budgets.
I have no way of knowing that. One would assume that just like we were on the state level, those funds that we knew were time limited would be thought of in the same way. And I'll tell you, we certainly do not have the budgetary capacity to continue all that we've done to support spending from the sources of revenues that have come through and included in our budget. So but I can I don't know what the communications have been. I will caution you, for those of us who were around in 2010, we did do a reduction in the general fund transfers, and Sears, you might remember that. There was agreement that spending reduction would occur schools that didn't. And some schools took the targets and worked with them and reduced the spending, and others did not. So how towns will respond, I guess, is yet to be determined. But I really would like to move, because this is a much broader discussion. It's only the beginning. This is just to deal with the urgency of the moment. And then we've got to have a lot more discussion around our school financing and, spending and exactly. And it gets into the school construction. It's just an enormous discussion. And it can solve in the next 10 minutes. So I really would like, unless it's further discussion, have the clerk call the roll. Any other comments? I don't want to cut it off, but we have the Secretary of State waiting patient right outside the door. So, Senator, you want to, Senator Western?
Senator Brewer,
Yes.
Senator Kirsten.
Yes.
See,
I know.
I'm looking over my glasses and not. Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Westman, yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes. I guess the reporter would. I'll be the reporter.
Senator White's.
Oh, thank you.
He's
Thank
in the
you very
walk.
much, Julia. Now,
Persons in the
if
walk.
you want to send the Secretary of State in. Thank you. I'll be right back. We just appropriated $500,000
Yeah.
to you.
On behalf of the school district.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And if you don't need it all,
You may want it back.
yeah, we want it back. All right, so we're sorry we've kept you waiting.
Not a problem. Coming in front of you right now is the packet, our budget packet.
But the reading, they got $500,000.
That's it. Well,
What more do you want?
we're gonna have that conversation. So, I am Sarah Copeland-Hampus, your Secretary of State, for the record, and I'm gonna cruise fairly quickly through this because I know that you're very familiar with the work of our office.
And you also know that we're the Senate and we don't.
And you wanna stay, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to spend a lot of time on the $193 off, for example.
Yes, would you?
Yeah.
Figure that one out. Well, with me today, I have our Deputy Secretary of State and Lauren Hibbert, and I also have two members of our finance team, Stacy Drinkwine and Michelle Eno. And they're here in case you want to know why the $193 is on. So we're gonna, I think, dive right in to be respectful of your time, dive right into page 7. And I'm gonna hand that over to the Deputy Secretary to cruise very quickly through our funding sources, and then we'll dive into some of the details.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. So as you all are familiar, we have two funds. The first is the SOS Service Fund, which is composed of corporations fees. This pays for 100% of the salary and benefits for 5 positions in, well, 6 positions in business services, 6 positions in elections, 19 positions in the State Records and Archives Center, and 53% of the executive and administrative services staff time and administration. We do have fiscal year 25 budget pressures. Our estimated budget is almost 9 million. This is an increase by almost $1 million due to salary and benefit contractual increases and the increased spending for the replacement of the existing systems. We have 4 systems that we're replacing, 1 in corporations, business services, and 3 in elections. And then we have the ongoing costs of universal vote by mail. Then we also have the OPR fund. This fund is composed of licensure fees, per statute, it can't be used for costs outside of professional
And we
licensing.
know you're getting hit with all the compact
We are.
legislation because that's really reducing
Yeah.
the fees. And then we have another one coming through, social worker, I believe, is another one.
Yes, we have two compacts going through the building right now, occupational therapy and social work. And it's a great example of where there's good public policy that should be implemented, but it does have a fiscal impact. And so we do have specific budgetary requests related to those compacts, but also along a larger conversation that we'd like to have as a result of the compacts. So in OPR, we have 41 FTEs, and the Office of Professional Regulation pays the remaining 47% of those staff time and expenses like mine. This budget also has pressures. The estimated budget for fiscal year 25 is 7.5. This is a decrease of about just over 600,000. Which is really due to a reduction of administrative time and IT costs. So we've really been trying to draw down costs wherever possible in that fund. But the budgetary pressures still exist. It's salary and benefits, IT project, implementation of new programs, and compacts that reduce the number of licensees in our state. Then we have federal funds, and I'll go through these quickly. Really, the high level on the federal funds, these all come out of Help America Vote Act, HAVA. And they all are used for specific purposes in elections. We are spending a significant amount in these grants in this year on the election system. So section 251 was the biggest of our grants. The original grant was almost 13 million. We have spent all of the principal, and now we are just within the interest, and we have a balance of 2.75. And then
And is that revenue then, was time limited, HAVA money, or is that accessible?
We have had this money, and it comes in rather irregular spurts when Congress can agree on sending money to the states to support election investments. And so that's why you see a significant balance in terms of the interest that we've earned on this money over the years. We are now at that point, as the deputy said, where we're investing in replacement of 3 IT systems within elections. And so we expect to tap that pretty significantly. And we certainly hope and expect that Congress will support continued funding.
One would hope so with all the attention on the integrity of elections.
It's hard to maintain the integrity of elections if you're not modernizing your IT systems.
But I will just say we are concerned about this. We've talked with the federal delegation about the importance of these funds for us, particularly with the small state minimum. But there is a bill that is drafted in both the House and the Senate, and it really hasn't moved. So we are concerned about the continuation of these funds. It's not a 5-alarm fire right now, because we are still able to spend within these grants, and we are planning to spend within these grants, but we don't know with certainty that these grants can be replenished in the future.
Feel a bit like Ukraine,
A little.
Center Star.
Yeah. When did that grant start?
I believe it was in 2008. 2008.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I remember having funding back when Jim Condos was chair. Gov 20.
And then we also have another grant, the security grant, which is about 8 million, was $8 million, now it's 5.8. We have remaining, and that includes our interest earned. This we have used really to support universal vote by mail, and the drop boxes, and also some cybersecurity functions. And then our newest grant is the DoD Electronic Absentee Systems for Elections grant. That was just under 700,000. We have 408,000 remaining, and it's for our voter accessibility project, which is federally mandated.
Takes us to page 10, if you're following along in your document. And this slide really outlines the IT spends that we have total project costs for the business services, election management, campaign finance and lobbying systems. And then an estimate on roughly what the annual spend will be over the next 2 years as we're building these systems. There will be ongoing maintenance costs after that, but as you can imagine, it's the build of the systems that is the big hit to our budget.
I assume that, so ADS is helping with the procurement of these systems.
Yes, yes.
You're not building your own.
We're not building it in-house. We have,
That tends to be very risky. Experiences showing that to be the case.
So slide 11 is a summary of our allocation requests.
So how can OPR, you're running at a deficit, but you can't, they have to, each profession has to support the regulation of the profession. So, how are you proposing to deal with your deficit?
I would point you to the bottom line on the right column there that says that we are going to ask for the creation of a structural reform study group for OPR. There are a number of different ways that we could tackle the challenges of dwindling number of licensees as we join more interstate compacts.
Can you at least charge a minimal fee for,
Most of the compacts
apply for reciprocity or something? I mean, you have to verify that they are licensed in the other state.
Yes, most of the compacts have a requirement that when you have a compact license, that you can go anywhere without paying an additional fee in other states. And so because the public protection aspect of licensure means that we need to have law enforcement officers, investigators, and prosecuting attorneys in those instances of professional misconduct. There is a set level of expense for the professionals who are practicing in the state, regardless of whether their license originates here or not. And so we have been working on language that would help us set up a committee to study the funding structures, and we hope to come back with a recommendation next year on some changes to the way we support the operations of OPR.
But
Yes, I'm sorry.
there must be bigger states in Vermont that are bleeding a lot more than we are.
It's interesting because part of our issue is economies of scale. So every state has to have a robust IT system that can communicate with other states and.
It doesn't matter whether it's 1,000 or 10,000.
Right, exactly. So I think the biggest way to encapsulate our issue is we're losing licensees and we already were small and we have many of the same costs as a larger state. So, it's a significant issue. We provide, through the Office of Professional Regulation, a public good that all Vermonters can rely on. But how we do it and how we're funded, I think, is right for conversation.
So, all of this, though, you have just the one ups and downs. So, everything you're doing is either with OPR or special funds. Sometimes you even have funds to give to the general fund, but probably not.
Well, when you have 4 IT systems that are all aging out.
That's why I
in
said
the
probably
same
not.
cycle, yes, that is correct. I think we, to be prudent, we would also think about planning for 10 years from now when these systems.
Now, one thing that we gave you last year, you didn't necessarily ask for it, and that was public access television, thinking that in fact was a function that supported your whole democracy, civic engagement, civics education. Could you just tell us what has that meant, that little gift meant to you?
Yes. Well, it has certainly strengthened the ties between our office and all of the community access television organizations around the state, and I very much appreciate it. So thank you for giving us that gift, because it was, it opened up a conversation on how we collaborate, how we benefit each other. Obviously, we are just the pass-through from the money that you appropriated to those organizations, but they are very concerned about Vermonters' access to their democracy, as are we. And so it has opened up a lot of conversations about how we can get more information out in front of Vermonters so that they are better informed when they go to vote. And so they are better able to participate at all levels of government.
No, thank you. Of course, they're trying to get some additional funding. I don't know how, that's been in the House Ways and Means at this point. Because the revenues from cable decline.
Yes, as they will.
And they probably will continue to decline. Although, I understand up in Ways and Means, there was some discussion about, is this the best technology? You know, I mean, obviously, you think about how the legislature now, everything is actually, anyone can access, any of our hearings or whatever. They don't have to come to Montpelier, you don't have to go to the select board meeting, so are there other ways? And, don't, you know, when we gave you that, it's not just pass through, but are there ways to make sure that, that we're looking at sort of the whole organizational construct, looking at the technology that supports it? Are there ways in which it can be, perhaps doesn't need to be modernized in some ways? We didn't know, but we felt that, it really could benefit from that kind of connection with your work. So I hope that, I don't know who's in your civics education, but, that's part of your discussions with those
I would
providers.
say we're at the beginning of that work, and certainly watching the bills that are in discussion about the financial structure for them moving forward. I think we collectively need to really respect the space that community television has and do that work to understand what they need from a systemic level. And I think we're just at the beginning of that.
Oh, I'm sure. Senator Purchase?
Civics education contract, what is that?
Which page are you on?
I'm on page 13. Sort of looks like it's an up and down, but I don't know if it is.
Yes, it is the up and down.
It's not
The 150 you're looking
Yeah,
at.
that's the.
the last.
Yeah, that's
That's what
our,
the total.
that's our budget, yes.
It's including the staff.
Yes.
Is it a contract?
No, we have hired a position. Robin Palmer is our education and civic engagement coordinator. She's fabulous. If you ever want to hear an update on our civics program, we'd be happy to share that with you. She's working on our first ever civic health index. We have a collection of 30 or 40 partner organizations around the state so that we can get a really good look at what different populations tend to do in terms of their civic engagement. And I expect this civic health index, when completed, will give us a roadmap for where we should focus our attention in the coming 5 years for outreach. Back to slide 11, I just want to run through really quickly, the IT spend will loom large in everything that we're talking about this year. But with respect to our ask around the elections allocation, universal vote by mail costs us approximately $1.3 million. And we have previously been able to offset that with our HAVA grant money, but of course.
This isn't in the governor's proposed. Your general fund allocation request. None of it?
Yes, but that's a normal expense for all, any of state.
I'm gonna say, honestly, I'm not sure if what we have received historically is in the governor's proposed. So historically, in election years, our office has received around 400 to 450,000. I don't know, I can look into whether that's in the governor's proposed, but we are asking for
Do you
more.
know? All right. I'm not sure what's, we haven't, had the run through, we have the, Commissioner Finance and Management waiting, so perhaps you can.
I bet. Any other questions about the elections requests? Or the PR compact offsets?
I have a question on the OPR piece, and that is, has the House, put any of these OPR requests in? Or are they considering that now?
Each of the bills, as they come through, will have those basic, they don't have the, that's why I'm putting that in the budget. Okay.
Got it. But is the Appropriations Committee in the House, have they put this in separately? Or are they considering?
As they are considering bills, they are,
It's in there competing with everything else for 25.
Okay.
And we
We
are,
had one for 15.
I see that.
and we are, testifying in front of House Government Operations, I believe tomorrow on the budget. And asking them to write a letter to House Appropriations on the OPR side of the House and the election side of the House, so that Appropriations has a letter from House Government Operations with these asks. And Senator Lyons, we are gonna put S-109's ask in that as well. And this,
for that.
this
She hasn't got the money yet.
No.
Well, we're got another group of duelists.
Yeah, we're gonna have more.
Yeah, you can't have one without the death duelist.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We have a great house with program.
It's not the same. That's what
I know.
I read it. I read the article.
Oh, you did? After, by recommendation of Senator
He
Stevens?
sent it to me.
Well, he's sponsoring the bill for it, so.
I'll be sponsoring that in this near future.
Well, good. Stand in line. All right.
Well.
You don't ask?
So the slide, slide 12 is, it's for your information, but.
Let me ask, if you've got these positions, do you have the fundings without this page?
So our budget as currently forecasted includes these 3 positions, but we do need them to be created.
Okay, all right, that's all I wanted to know is you've got the funding for these positions and don't have them. This is what you're requesting.
Yes.
All right.
Well, they might get something.
Plus, you
Might get something.
Which is that's the bill that gave $500,000.
I know. I don't feel like we have any choice. And I didn't suggest it come out of the ed fund either. Because
I would have been talking.
that would have been a very positive move, wouldn't it? Other questions of Secretary of State? Definitely. You have to go next door now?
Yes, on 850.
Oh, on the 500,000?
How you're gonna spend it? Did you come up with that number? Or did they ask you?
They asked us, and we were able to help with an estimate, but we don't know how many districts will take advantage of the opportunity to delay, so it's just.
Yet to be determined, right?
So just make it
Get your receipts in fact.
485 and other 15.
Oh, go to the duelist.
We'll track the money closely and be able to report back quickly how that fund is being spent.
Well, I think everybody will be tracking the numbers.
We are happy to answer any further questions, indirectly or directly. Feel free to invite us back. It's always nice to be in your sunny corner room.
I know, it is.
Yeah, your building doesn't get much sun. It seems like all the windows are facing
Yeah, yeah.
right away.
Well, thank you. Sorry we kept you waiting or, so next, if you want to send Adam Gresham in.
Oh,
The seats are warm.
Order
I'm gonna tell him that I got you all warmed up.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
This is smaller than this.
Adam said if you can't take me on time, I'm not coming.
Oh, all right.
I don't see him out here.
When I was headed to the bathroom, he was walking, he told me they were late.
I don't see the secretary, oh, that's not executive branch position, so secretary of state would not be. Are the positions in this budget? They're not that. No. What?
House man.
Well, if they didn't fund the positions, then they'd have the money for the other things.
Oh, jeez.
Now, why would they need three more people? I think they haven't laid anybody off. Just keep adding more.
It's still London. It's in London.
Well, I have to say, elections it's become a very significant concern with all the complaints about, rigged elections and fraud and, so forth. So,
Yeah, but we had that 2 years ago.
You sound like Trump.
well,
I didn't ask her about the cost.
so that they scrutiny on elections, but then they want a financial. And this will help with workload and model and IT positions.
You think the League of Cities and Towns have had their town people well trained in that?
So Christian's going over oh, I see, this is his first run through of the governors, 25, we haven't done.
We haven't,
Yeah.
well, because he wasn't available last week, we just started taking testimony from the.
Yeah, so the pictures of area or on the cover of the thing.
Probably in the mention, you don't have to, I have to like stuff.
Why would you quit?
This was.
Yeah, you want. So they need money.
One.
Well, it's like they are away for
But maybe it's not.
If you were gonna do this, you should have a little white quote that said, Appropriations Committee.
There he is.
Adam, sit right down. That's all.
I just passed one of your committee members on the way to the men's room, so.
Well, we'll get started because we're running behind, as you can imagine. We're trying to get 850 out, so we had to struggle with that. And that backed up everything. So we wanted you to come in and sort of do sort of a walkthrough, kind of the highlights of the budget, and how you're thinking in terms of how you approached it, because I'm sure you had lots of requests for spending. I bet you could bring in a budget at a 20% increase too, couldn't you?
That would have been easy.
Huh?
That would have been easy.
That would have been too easy? Maybe,
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's easy, but
30% maybe? So, needless to say, this is, I sat in this room and some of us have, as long as I have, 10 or years, I guess would
I
be.
haven't sat in this room, but I sat in another.
And I have to say that I think this is probably one of the most difficult budget environment that I've ever experienced. People are coming in, they have no sense of how limited the funding is, exactly what you did not include, and could not include in, as a result of staying within existing revenues. And so we're having another public hearing tonight, and I think we're gonna have 50 people will come in and tell us what they would like to have funded, that is not in the governor's budget. And
That's you,
what?
that's you.
Well, then the rest can send emails. It's, so some of the things that aren't in here are some of the ways that you make this budget work. Needless to say, are causing some source of consternation. But we know the environment in which you put it together and understand. And one of the things that will be organizing, and that is, and just to put you on notice, is that the Joint Fiscal Committee was given the responsibility of overseeing the progress on homelessness and how we are in that. I know that we have a report on the council, but that seemed to be much more long-term, and I guess,
What now?
the homeless
Oh, that.
council, which, I spent some of the weekend reading all the reports, and now, of course, I can't, find it. But, it's sort of like emergency housing, we'll talk again about it later, and I guess, we're sitting here with, a lot of advocacy to continue to pay motel rooms. We are even, getting communications that we should have not, closed the door and kept our adverse weather policy. And June 30th is coming, and the question really is, with the number of beds that we've got relative to what we have for, the number of households receiving this benefit, what are we going to do July 1st? And it has not been clear to us what happens July 1st, other than shut the program down. And that, I don't think will get us too far. So we really need to understand, the urgency that is upon us, simply because June 30th isn't that far away. And I'm not asking you to respond right now, but I'm just telling you that, last year we had a very, at the end of the year, the governor vetoed the budget. You know what happened. It's created a tremendous amount of difficulty in, addressing this huge area of spending, which actually is cannibalizing a whole lot of other parts of state government and spending, because you can't spend money twice. So, that is our plan to really have a briefing that tells us exactly what is underway, the urgency, and what you will have for capacity versus anticipated need as of July 1st. And, because I feel like Groundhog Day. This is exactly where we were a year ago, Commissioner, and I'm not asking you to move on, but I do remember my comments about the need to get really some very significant number of temporary, shelter, beds, online. And, I read the council's report, and it was like, I don't see any urgency here. It was much more longer term, saying, well, of course, no one's gonna argue that permanent housing will help with homelessness. But until we get it online, we're in a dilemma here. So, so that's enough said. We'll schedule the meeting, and so I just wanted to let you know that we are seeing the clock tick, and the advocacy to extend, I mean, even to June 30th, with the modest change that we made. So the reality is it's gonna be right there at the top of people's attention. And so I don't know, this is not a very sexy looking document here,
Now,
just to get you back to what you came for.
I would encourage you to look at the executive budget summary, specifically pages 14 to 16. Adam Gresham, Commissioner of Finance and Management, and Madam Chair, thank you for.
All right, everybody have this document or maybe online?
Just to, yeah, what I would do is just,
The 2-page.
Oh. All right. Well, since I have it out, what page?
It's 16.
14.
14, 15 and 16. I'll start on 14. And I'm gonna do what I traditionally do, is give you the sources and then the uses, and you'll see in this document, in this presentation, kind of the struggle, to your point, Madam Chair, the struggle we had in getting balance. I mean, there were a few things that we did that were a little bit out of the ordinary. But I would say probably most representative of the challenge we had is when you look at what the, we listed as governor's initiatives, policy, you know, it adds up to about $17 million, which is paltry relative to the past couple of years, albeit it's somewhat more in line with years and years ago. But of that $17 million policy, there's really not a lot of stuff that you can get up on a podium and brag about. You know,
Date with me, with people like me.
well, yeah,
No,
anyway, you know,
we
that-
realize it's just.
that's just kind of the challenge that we had, but, you know, just looking at page 14, so here's how we put it together. I mean, you see up at top, you know, the e-board revenue forecast, that's based, but one line below, you have the, what we call the notwithstand language from redirecting property transfer tax. Not a year or 2 years ago, well, actually a year and 2 years ago, that number was up above 20 million. Property transfer tax has subsided quite substantially. So even if we did notwithstand, it would only be another 5 million to the VHCB and 3 million to that municipal and regional planning commission. So we're not, I mean, it's an extra $8 million to the general fund, but it used to be more than $20 million. I mean, that revenue.
Well, we remember, we kept reducing the
Has
not
subsided.
understood amount, and we put the 10 million back that you pulled out last year.
Are those the only two things, VHCV and the local planning
Well,
and general fund?
we also take some money from tax. They get 2% of the transfer tax to run the current use program. But they don't need that. I mean, we're not starving. They tell us what they need. So they need roughly half of that. As well, the geographic information services, they need
The tiny.
roughly, about less than half of what they. And so there is some other redirecting, but it's predominantly, you're right, from VHCB and municipal and regional planning commissions. But I was just going to say that the notwithstanding amount, the redirecting amount is quite a bit less than, you know, another couple steps down the property transfer tax, and you'll have nothing to notwithstand. So, so that's the first thing. There's another $8 million from that. The direct apps are pretty
Actually, I
much.
haven't had anybody come in saying, get rid of the notwithstanding. They
Not that I know of.
probably will.
I'm sure they will. You know, they get this
So we could
money.
add that, not 8 million there, 9 million for childcare and not fully funding the state college transformation plan. We're getting right up there.
Getting right up there, Madam Chair.
Uh-huh.
If you look at the direct apps, there's nothing that really stands out there. I would note that DFR is a little bit below what they were last year at 61 million, but you know, still
Because
a
of some,
healthy amount.
there's
There's some seasonality. We took out most of this, but there's some of that. The AG settlement, there may be more there as the months come on, but they thought they could safely put $2 million. Liquor is, you know, what it was last year.
That's the tax or is that something?
That's the excess, you know, they have an enterprise fund, whatever excess it costs them to, you know, above and beyond what it costs them to run their program.
similar to what we do with the lottery to the ed fund
Right.
on from.
But from the tax,
What?
from the tax,
Yeah.
from the link tax, there's no, not other, that's where the money comes from.
It comes from liquor proceeds. The excise tax goes directly to the general. But that's just from liquor proceeds above and beyond what it costs to run the program. So basically,
It's not the tax, it's their margin.
yeah,
Yeah, I see, okay.
Sales tax. It's not that size, that's
No.
separate.
that's right. Sales tax goes to, we're all sales tax.
Oh,
No,
Yeah.
no, not the sales tax on cannabis. Please keep that.
No, this is liquor.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
The one thing I would point out here that is a little bit unusual is the unclaimed property. You know, for years, we would, Alpro will give us a number between $1.5 and $2 million, we put it there. And by the time June 30th rolled around and we were closing the books,
Oh, the governor.
$6.5 million.
And yes, we've historically used that to balance the budget, but the treasurer has a new plan, which would add another 6.5 million whole.
So we spoke to him and we agreed to disagree, but this is, the 6.5 million is a 5-year. We're not, this is an assumption that we look back at 5 previous years of what unclaimed property. At the end of the day, we would put in 1.5 to 2, then there would be, you guys would go through it, or there'd be budget adjustment where we boost it, then there'd be the C-section of the big bill. And all of that, by the time we actually took the amount at the end of the year, would be above everything, above what you guys estimated, above what we estimated. So we just looked back at 5 years and said, what's the average amount we reverted? And it's been about $6.5 million. So that's a little bit higher, you know, in past years, we've had 1.5 to 2 there. Sports wagering is brand new, and that, Commissioner Knight tells me is probably a conservative estimate. So I think that's money in the bank. Highly unusual here is the reversion from the legislature, which is a kind of a bizarre thing. Which I think we may have spoken to you about before. Their budget, they had a number of costs that they needed to absorb, including IT. And they, instead of kind of reducing their base, what they did is they told us they would revert from FY 24.
But that's a one-time and you.
It's a one-time. It's,
But it's all under base revenue.
it's,
Well, one cannot be pure totally.
again, there's one more instance of that I'll get to in a minute. But anyway, the reversion from the legislature, that's, you know, they confirmed that, they in fact offered it to us to offset their base increase. So you're right, it is a little bit of one time, but it offsets their base increase.
Is the,
Yes, go ahead.
is the sports wagering, that's the total amount, or that's the increase from?
That's
what
the
was
total.
projected?
That's the net from, you know, after their expenses.
Well, it seems like they got it going before the Super Bowl, so
Yeah,
that which seems to be a big.
Yeah.
Well, they said Super Bowl was huge. 94,000.
94,000.
Yeah.
That's of course for this fiscal year, but next year, you know, they have 3 companies that are delivering this service.
And they're
Those companies,
advertising, they are
They're advertising
advertising.
heavily, those companies have a lot of history and, you know,
I
they.
see the House has got a bill that would prohibit advertising or something, very constrain it.
maybe they should.
So, they just can't help themselves.
No, well,
Maybe they advertise only in the Bennington van.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, they must be spending.
quite a bit on
megabucks
TV.
on it.
but
You can
the
advertise that in
March,
state.
March Madness, which is. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's a big one.
It's
always good.
It's
huge.
March
64.
19th or something.
Well, they have the women's and men's.
Take that all the way down the.
Probably.
How many dribbles?
So,
The one thing on here that I did put here that has no money next to it is the Secretary of State, just kind of as a reminder that they used to give us a direct ad.
they have nothing, they want general
Yeah,
funds.
they want money.
Last year, they got a 20% boost in fees. They canceled their direct application and, you know, they still need additional general fund. You know, I point that out. I know that they were here earlier. They've got needs, a lot of technology needs and the like, but just
Yeah, but
keep in mind that that used to be a net contributor to the general.
I do remember those days.
That money wasn't earmarked toward IT. And that new money they wanted wasn't the pocket change toward IT.
Well, they wanted. Well, they've got it here, what they want, total election, 800,000.
Yeah, that used to be 450, but that includes, I think universal mail in and, I don't know, maybe some other security, but it used to be 450. We used to
So
get-
what does the governor's budget include?
Well, we did not include that.
No,
Not even the 450.
We did not.
Ben didn't give it to me, and I don't know.
Well,
That was not a request.
we could include 800 and take it back.
So let me ask you, Commissioner, then, the 450, they don't have that, they would like a total of 800. So basically, we'd have to find
It would be
all
net.
800.
It would be net, yes.
Okay.
That's right.
So it's really an increase of 1.2 because The 400 they normally send us, we aren't getting, plus they want 8 more, so.
I'm not sure they gave it to us last year either.
That was the first year they did.
So
But when you put all the direct apps together, they're a little under 100 million, 99 million to be precise. And then there's some deducts, and I would note, to your point earlier, Madam Chair, I mean, this is the first budget I've delivered that hasn't asked for a military pension income tax.
We did know
I
that.
noticed that.
And, you know, that obviously the governor will be very happy if you decide to put that in the budget. I suspect you won't, but that's not something that he's lost any fervor for. It was just,
I guess he doesn't like our progressive income tax structure because I have a hard time giving a tax break to a 3-star general who's got twice as much money as some poor working family that's paying more taxes. I have a hard time philosophically to say that one group of taxpayers, it should be based on ability to pay, not necessarily whether you get it from the military or the state of Vermont or from Global Foundries.
that
So,
may be true, Madam Chair. We're among
I
the
know-
few states that do not lead.
because we need to expand our older population, because our demographics really require us to recruit more older citizens.
These are not.
Huh?
These are in their 40s. Most of these people are in their 40s and 50s.
Then what I would do is give them an incentive on their wages. They will come and they will work. If the argument is we need them in the workforce, then make the incentive on,
take this
The wage.
income tax.
not on the retirement. So
Maybe we'll do that next year.
I've suggested it, but a lot of my suggestions end up against a brick wall, so.
There
I
were.
won't take it personally.
There were 2 revenue deducts. The first, the downtown village center tax credit in statute is capped at 3 million. We're asking to move it up to 5 million. Over the past 2 years, that's happened with one-time money. There's been a one-time boost to 5 million, so we're asking to make that permanent. There's more than enough demand for that. In addition,
Oh, look,
that's an H7 point.
everyone who wants more money said we could do more if you would give us more. So,
Oh, no.
So we
You
made
should
choices.
Tell us we'll make more.
oh, yes, right.
We made
It's
choices.
Calculation.
Yeah, okay.
Some of the choices were downtown, I mean, and this goes along, this is part of the housing package in H719. In addition, there is the exemption from property transfer tax. And that's for predominantly for blighted buildings. People who purchase and rehabilitate blighted buildings. So the thought is that if we exempt them from paying property transfer tax, that would be one small incentive for that to do it. But when you add those together, you get $2.4 million of deduct. And so our base revenue net is 2.218 billion. And we add to that carry forward from 23. This is net of anything we used in BA. So as you're aware, we used some, a little over $100 million in BAA, I believe, it's my memory. So the net carry forward is just under $60 million. To the extent that either the House or the Senate BAA or the conference committee agrees, you, in the Senate and much more so in the House, use some of that 59 million addition. So the Senate or the House construct would carry forward in this. But that's basically what we brought to bear, 2.218 in base and just under 60 million in one time. Flipping over it, it shows you how we used it. We start off with the usual, we start with base appropriations from Act 78. We add in the annualization of the Pay Act. And we had this year unusually, because the extra 50 million in childcare, we made that an adjustment to DCF's base appropriation.
And then you reduced it by 9.
And then well, you'll see that further down.
Sorry, I skipped it.
So that's where we start. And then there are what we call current services. Many of these you'll find familiar: salaries and benefits, Internal service funds were actually came out better than we thought. We were a little bit frightened there. Probably the largest unintended or unanticipated consequence was from the floods. Our building, our property insurance was up quite a bit more than we anticipated. But in total, another 3 million in internal service funds. Guess what? When property tax rates go up, property tax assistance is required. So there you see the $4 million that tax kind of ran their numbers and thought that that would be about what they needed. One important point here, and when Madam Chairman, you mentioned that there was some one-time money from the legislature. There is another piece of one-time money that we used, and that is, you see in the decrease in VSERS pension plus. The reason that's a 9 million decrease is because last year there was a 9 million base. And what we
And we did that very consciously.
understood. What we did this year is we
Took an ongoing expenditure and replaced it with one-time money.
we replaced it with one-time money this year because we had two appropriations in 2 years ago and 1 year ago that were from the legislature, largely to deal with Act 114. One appropriation had $8 million left in it, and the other one had a little under 4, I believe. So this was money that was sent to the Secretary of Administration that was to be used to help get us through the additional requirements in Act 114, which probably most included the new OPEB pre-funding that we had when we built the budget, just what we didn't anticipate.
Are you planning on resigning your position before you have to come in again? You're gonna have 9 million on childcare. You're gonna have 18 million on one time for an ongoing pension obligations. And the list goes on, so.
I'm not sure about the child. I'm not sure about that.
I am very worried about it because we knew that we were building off that base of general fund to determine the amount of the payroll tax. That's why, if you don't have that level of base, then it directly impacts the calculation
Thank you.
that you potentially are gonna have to raise through the payroll tax.
So just taking this 9 million to the pension plus, federally, we're really hard pressed to go that. You would be really hard pressed to do that. There are federal restrictions against doing that. I think we talked to you about that.
No, I know you can't do it through the ADEC,
So
but were we doing the amortized, we were doing the amortized payment through the ADEC?
we were,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's.
But the extra payment but that admittedly does not mean it can't
No.
be considered base. We can use base money for that. We're not doing it this year,
No,
but
we
we
were-
would separate it out from the eight.
And we were just calculating the avoided debt service on the reduced amount of liability. And using it to fund the plus.
Right. We understand how the numbers
Yeah,
came
sure
there.
you
We're
do.
funding it 100% as the legislature asked, and we're hitting the ADEC, we hope by 100.001%. In other words, we're very careful making that, but this year, I mean, honestly, we had the money, it was appropriated to us over 2 successive years. It wasn't used. We thought this would be a good way to use it and helped us use our base for other things that were necessities. So yes, next year, this will be not one time, this will be a whole, we're aware of that.
The VSERS or the childcare?
For childcare, the 9 million, which you see further down the page, that, DCF would be the better expert, but I can tell you, we did not have Chris, pinned to the mat with his arm behind his back with a gun in his hand. I mean, this was not something that we insisted on. This was-
I'm not saying that their calculation, I'm talking about how the assumptions we made in setting the tax rate, which they would not have any knowledge of. That was done right here. So that's what I'm concerned about. It's not what they're experiencing right now because they don't know. They were not party to how we determined the amount of that payroll tax.
So is the point that that payroll tax will take in more revenue than needed?
No. The payroll tax assumed all that revenue, general fund base, and trying to keep that as small of tax liability as we possibly could.
Or we'll reduce the tax if it's.
So if you reduce the base that's there as we mature the program, then your tax rate will be short.
But I think there were also assumptions in that payroll tax assumption about utilization and about caseload. And what I can tell you is that
And
it
we know-
hasn't equaled what the assumptions were, which is why this money is there.
I don't know how you.
But why
can-
not put it in one time?
Yeah, why not one time? Because let me tell you, this is when you're just starting this up. And it's gonna take a little time to build that capacity and to build and to expand your eligibility and get those families in. So it would be very early, and that was a January startup date. So why wouldn't you? How could you make these kinds of decisions with the benefit of no experience today?
Well, we do have FY 24 where the appropriation, we also in FY 24 reduced the appropriation by $9 million. We have 7-8 months of experience. And I can confirm to you that that $9 million reduction was conservative. And it's not that we're not carrying out exactly what we were told to do.
That at some point, all I'm saying is if the assumptions are right relative to out into the future, then you're going to either do something that we really don't want to do, and that's adjust and increase the payroll tax, or you're gonna have to replace the general fund to get to that level of cost that was estimated. And it was gonna take a little while to roll it out, no question about it. So I worry this budgetary issues are creating, once again, the environment for short-term decisions with a long-term implication. That's gonna come back and haunt whoever's gonna be sitting around this table. That's what I'm worried about. It's not just, this next 12 months, for example. But that's what I'm worried about. You don't need to worry about
I'm not.
necessarily. But that's why it is concerning, because I've sat here and I've seen us defer. And we're doing it in transportation. We're doing it with using one-time surplus in central garage. We are advancing and delaying the state match that we're gonna have to catch up with because we've drawn down the federal dollars. Those are all future obligations that are unbudgeted, and they help you in the short term. But it's like pensions when it comes back. It's difficult.
If it comes back, we're
Well,
making assumptions and we don't know.
We've been bitten quite a few times by that dog.
We are, and in the meantime, we redeploy the money to where we need it. What we're saying here is, we don't think we'll need this in 25. If we need it in 26, you're right, it'll be enough, no question. But, we made our best assumptions. And again, I'm not really the expert on this, but I can tell you that this was not done, with people's arms tied behind their back, guns to their head. This was the best assumption.
I'm not questioning that based on the information in the here and now, but I'm telling you, our thinking that occurred here in this room when we were doing some of this work. And it was much more longer term than simply let's get through 12 months and paste it together the best we can.
Understood. That's really, the savings, the BSERS, where we took an appropriation that was unused and used that to make the BSERS 12 million payment. As well, there was some ups in pension contributions, as you can see below that. But that 9 million and then the 9 million from CC Fed, were two, I think important parts of the construct for this budget. You see further down, there were the normal ups in higher ed, basically UVM, Vermont State Colleges, we gave them a 3% bump in their base allocation.
But that doesn't
As
fully
well,
fund the
yes.
transformation plan, does it?
No, it doesn't.
And
Transformation was one time.
what?
The transformation plan was one time, they'd asked for 10, we gave them 5.
And we did a 5-year increase on the base a year ahead last year.
Yeah, their base is where they originally asked it to be, 48.5 million.
Yeah, I understand that.
And we gave them a 3% increase on that. UVM, same thing. So that's how it kind of shakes out. The one other thing I would point out in current services is there's a $10 million increase in the PAD appropriation, which is substantially due to corrections. So the PAD this year is going to be 31.5 million, 31 plus million dollars, which is a lot.
And it truly is, and it's really hitting us because all the other community-based entities that have been created that sometimes replaced government state-operated facilities are getting level funded. And so this disjuncture between if you work for the state versus you're getting your money and you're getting level funded. And we get hit with that all the time in terms of we're competing for the same workforce. Many of the programs require people with in healthcare. And so the more I know that the SEA that's out there and they're working for it, but I'm just telling you that it really creates a tremendous amount of difficulty with all the other entities that provide services on behalf of the state to operate in a level funded environment. And it's gonna be worse. I mean, if school spending goes up 15 or 20%,
I would note with corrections, this 10 million is base in the budget adjustment, which you guys are about to dig into and pass. There was 13 million, which included 2 million of the new healthcare contract, and then 11 million of additional side agreements. I mean, it is true that we have vacancies in corrections, but it is not true that we don't care. We care a lot, and we're trying to do the best we can to reduce those vacancies. And to your point, it's not easy. It's just not easy, but it is taking from other things, which is in part why you see some of those line items above. I mean, we had to find the money somewhere.
yeah, I know. We understand that, Senator Starr.
Yeah, I was wondering, what, compared to what it costs to keep prisoners here at home compared to out of state beds?
What's the cost differential then?
No.
I can't answer that. I don't.
Senator Sears, well,
You spent $20 million and you don't know why?
Well, I know why, but
Well, wouldn't you check it out? I mean,
well, Department of Corrections is.
corrections, I'm sure.
We know the out-of-state beds are cheaper.
I don't want to get an answer from the person that's causing the issue. I mean, everybody has a boss and thought you guys are their boss.
Well, I think the governor, no, actually for the commissioner, it's the Secretary of Human Services.
So what does it cost, Senator, you may know, what does it cost to send a prisoner out of state to
About
be
30,000
housed?
a year.
Okay, what's it cost to
58,
house them at
Is it about
Columbia?
58 here?
Huh?
Is it about 58 here?
About, I've heard anywhere from 50 grand a year to 100.
I think 80 is.
Depending upon the individual, you've got older offenders in Springfield who are costing tremendous amount of money because of their medical conditions.
But you average it out, so it's 80,000.
Say it's 80,000 in versus 30 out. 50,000 more in. But don't forget, you got 400 and some odd people on detention who we can't send out of state because they're haven't been found guilty. And so that's an expensive group also, and
But 80 versus 30,
yeah,
we got another 20. I mean,
well,
What is this, prison population, not to get too far off.
I drive to Florida to buy a car because it's 5,000 cheaper than it is here in Vermont.
There's a verse.
400.
So committee, I want to get back,
Sorry.
we'll get the figures. One, I was thinking about it though, Senator Hughes. If in fact we move, a number of those inmates from Springfield to that long-term care facility, that frees up beds that would then mean you can reduce your out-of-state population.
well, if you could out of state, you'd also free up money. This is where that stupid medical contract is.
Yeah, I don't think you can probably, you're gonna extract much there, but.
Well, but they have to use hospitals, stuff like that, for dialysis.
But, some of but where you would make it up is then it means you have to buy fewer out-of-state beds, and that would clearly, come back to justice reinvestment.
It should,
It should.
so there,
So,
that's questionable too.
all right, well, let's have the commissioners,
Governor's eating up everything,
what?
like a move.
Wow, freeloaders are eating up everything.
So we have the governor's initiatives that we need to go through.
The only good piece of news prior to getting to that, Madam Chair, is there was a small amount of reduction in debt service. And that's simply because we didn't issue debt.
So let me ask, we created the capital fund. So you put some general fund right off the top into the capital fund.
You'll see that further down, 10.7 million.
And that's right out of the base.
That is. We consider that as expenditure. That money is, as you're aware, that's already been spent.
Where is it?
That's further down in the
Down in the bottom
transfer.
box.
Oh,
It's 10.6.
10.6. Oh, I thought you said 2,700.
So
But ultimately, this committee will decide the expenditure of that general fund. I have a list of, what you're proposing to use it for. And, we'll have to have some discussions. I don't know what the institutions committee in the House is going to do. But that obviously is another pressure on the general fund.
it is, but I think 10 million of that is already spent from last year's capital budget. So, if that amount is not sent, I think there would have to be reductions in here.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are really feisty today.
I got it. I mean, we're getting hammered all over the place. You can't imagine, what?
Okay.
I mean, let me tell you, no one has to, have a badge to get into, have a conversation with us, and we've been hammered on a whole lot of fronts here, believe it or not.
And it's just.
And we don't have any staff to insulate us from it either.
So on to base uses, as I mentioned earlier, a total of 17 million of policy uses, policy changes, which is historically not unusual, but based on the past couple of years, it's highly unusual. You see two superior judges there. That was because I knew that Senator Sears was going to be here and he was going to ask for that.
But
Yeah, but now we're
might
getting,
surprise you that they're asking for.
It would not surprise me at all.
For those judges that they feel they need two assistants, and so it upset, they also are moving a position that was, master to,
is that right?
yeah,
That was one of our,
one of our great initiatives.
yeah, well, and now, of course, that's just created, we're hearing from the state's attorneys that, their workload, and particularly with all the homicides, has just increased tremendously, and they're on their knees relative to getting cases investigated, ready to bring to court. So that work has to be done before the judges have much to do. So it's, throughout that whole system.
We need to clear up the backlog in the criminal courts. That is causing a lot of the problem that Senate Judiciary and the governor agreed on. Some public safety issues.
I think part of, I mean, and this isn't about, they didn't come here to talk about state attorneys, but I know that they've been circulating the bill. I would acknowledge that they've got a tight budget. I would also acknowledge that, you know, last year, as you remember, they got 5 new deputy state attorneys, a victims advocate, and 2 legal assistants. So their budget is absorbing all of that. And that's why, you know, that basically equals what they're saying
They only want 25 this year.
and so, you know, without new revenue or a dramatic increase in their budget, I get it. I mean, you know, they got 9 new positions last year and they've got to absorb that. Now they're coming back and they're asking for more and. Anyway, just wanted to understand.
We appreciate it.
Within, sorry,
No, I've finished, no,
No, I just said we appreciate this Adam's comments about the state attorney. I appreciate it. I understand.
Actually, I found, an email that we were sent by the defense attorney last year talking about that, whole issue. David's like, so I actually have it somewhere, I need to discuss it with you. Some of the points there. So aren't you enjoying your job, Commissioner?
I am.
Oh, good.
I feel like I'm on a roll here. The pro tem's not here. I feel like I can unwind a bit.
Senator Lyons has got.
so I'm looking at the, base funding, the mental health crisis specialist we used to be one time. And then new regional emergency management coordination and 8 new mental health crisis specialists. Now, it says DPS. Well, my concern has always been that anyone who is hired to be a mental health crisis specialist needs to have either education in mental health or be directed by our department.
Well, they come out of the HSBA, I believe.
Yeah, these are contracted.
These are all the contracted positions. Oh, right.
Yeah, these are.
And when we did that, we actually, and Senator Ash was here, we basically said, these people are actually more appropriate response to many of the call outs than a law enforcement officer. And we told them that they should do it and fund it out of their own budget. And now we seem to be having, 8 new mental health crisis specialists.
Where-
And 1 new regional emergency management coordinator. Is that a different one? Regional emergency management coordinator?
That was my question.
Yeah, that's unrelated. I mean, we wanted to keep this page 1 page, so the regional emergency management coordinator is also DPS, but that's someone to coordinate.
That's
for.
right.
Yeah, that is unrelated to the
Okay.
8 mental health.
Is that your question,
Okay.
Senator Lyons?
That answers it. Thank you.
You also notice, among, not necessarily policy changes, but changes nonetheless, we are meeting our obligation under the court settlement for Alice Pet Day.
Yeah.
So that's in there, and the psychiatric residential treatment facility, we're thinking maybe about $1.5 million.
You have enough to do the,
Was that facility in that,
facility for juvenile?
In Bennington?
No, in the Middlesex,
I don't know.
on a yearly basis for, I believe it's been in the budget for quite a while, and then it's supposed to open in January of 2024. I keep trying to get updates on when it might open, but I'm hoping that's been funded in the DCF budget.
Let's see,
It's critical to,
right.
if we're gonna take care of the juvenile.
who's looking after them now,
Well,
They're at home, they're.
some are out of
at-
state.
There's water everywhere.
But I'm pretty sure we do
I
have
think
that
it is
side,
covered.
but I wanna confirm.
I remember when Mike Smith first said he was gonna move these kids out of Woodside and that he could build a private um, place over in Newbury and a Medicare match, and that's not
Oh,
seems.
It's already come down,
He has it, right?
850.
And I just want to make sure it's budgeted. I'm sure it is, but
I'll have that answer for you, but I'm pretty sure it is. I wanna make sure.
for 25, because it would be a full year.
Yeah.
And everything that DCF wants to do in the government list, it depends on whether, I know it's funded for 24. Question is 25.
Okay,
I did want to point out that, I think you're familiar with the skilled nursing facilities method stabilization. That's something that the legislature has been calling for.
we didn't have an issue around that. That has to do with changing the occupancy rate and some of the cap expenditures that it seemed to be, those costs are stranded right now in terms of reimbursement and there's a report, and we're aware of that.
Yeah, I did want to call it out because it's something that we thought was important too, and.
Well, we can either
You know,
stabilize the rates or we can continue doing emergency relief.
exactly. So there's also 7 million for additional shelter beds that putting in our base, and this is largely to maintain them and provide the services.
New beds or just existing?
Both.
We already put in last year's budget, I thought it was 7.5 in
Yes,
GA
yes,
for housing, so this is on top of it.
that's correct.
Was that permanent or?
Yes, that was base.
So-
And this will be too. That line item also includes the summer EBT benefiting base expense, which is 300,000.
That's for the administration.
That's correct.
There was some IT cover.
So that's 300,000 and the balance is the shelter beds. Nothing else, of note. I know that you'll speak with the various departments at AOE over their civil rights contract and CTE coordinator as well. The Fish and Wildlife was very happy and to get, to fill a ward position.
So we have
More work with animal cruelty, and this won't be just one person doing all of the wardens will be doing animal cruelty, but this adds an additional. It's been quite a heavy workload.
I know, and we've had complaints in terms of the adequacy of our responses. And then there are times when people want a response that, sometimes there's a difference of opinion as to, whether the care is elevates to an unacceptable level.
It's rough.
Cases are terrible and messy to deal with.
And it's expensive too. I mean, you have 10 horses, what do you do with them? Yeah, I
They're
mean,
not,
it's expensive.
they're gonna save millions, aren't they, by closing the fish hatchery?
Actually, the budget
Millions
includes,
is strong.
600,000.
Oh.
600,000, is, if we say we keep that open, the operating costs that, have been taken out are 600,000, so you can add that to the 9 million, to the, whatever, to 600,000, so. And it would require replacement, I understand, we're gonna have Commissioner Hara come in, but, would be 10 million to do a replacement, and then there's still the issue around the discharge and whether in fact DEC would permit, because obviously there's a water quality issue associated with fish hatcheries. So, we're all getting the emails about that, but those savings were, 600,000, that you have assumed in the budget, as I understand it.
That's correct. And that basically pays for the RFR that happened within their ranks.
So it's a budget issue.
It's a budget
It's a
issue.
budget.
But that facility is due. It just is. It would never be re-permitted. So it's on a
Got, what, 4 years left?
2027.
That's how I'll respond to all the mad questions as the facilities doomed. Yeah, like Fukushima,
Anyway, they'll go get the fishermen all mad.
they'll never get
And
rid.
everybody else mad at us,
Well, no, I may be mad at it, yeah, that,
except for the homeless and.
I thought I was being straightforward on that.
no, you are, I'm joking with you.
But that is.
I did, there was a whole group of workmen in the building today, and I did explain to them that it's a budget issue, it's not. And I didn't realize it was 600,000.
That's what I was told, because, you don't have to staff it and the operational costs. And then even if you kept it open, then you'd have to find 600,000, but,
You also need to
but you
get
also,
permission, get permits.
you would have to give a water quality, yeah, the discharge. It's uncertain. What, they've done some things to improve it, but, to reduce the amount of solids and nutrients in the effluents, it is uncertain if they will be sufficient to meet water quality standards. A requirement, for Salisbury to be renewed. The cost to upgrade the facility to definitely meet water quality standards has been estimated at more than 10 million.
Yeah.
So it's,
So we should have.
Secretary Moore is pretty articulate on that. I
Right.
mean, she's pretty articulate on that. But yes, that's roughly a 600,000 savings. So
When you say the variance-based starting point on these, what math is that from like last year, but you can't do that. What do you?
So base starting point is the number that you see, 2119 base appropriations starting point. Variance, the starting point is how much
so
above
they're
that.
just tracking ups and downs from last year's base.
The,
2% is, that 3.6%.
Yeah.
Is the difference
Yeah,
From
the
last-
increase, the overall increase.
from the 2119,
so basically, yeah, right.
the 2195.
So the 3.6 is on top of it. It's in addition, so it goes 2.8 and then with the governor's initiatives goes to 3. You see there are one-time general fund appropriations there on the following page that many of which you probably already heard from the departments of jurisdiction on that. And then there's a transfer of the unsafe dam revolving loan fund. That amount could be 10 times that, we didn't have available, but that's.
Placeholder, as they would say.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is they need much more than that, but that's what we had available. You also notice, we spoke, I would say, at length, not I personally, but our administration on the Waterbury Armory, issue. So those are, one time, and then below that, you see transfers, and it occurs to me that when I was going through our sources, I did leave one out. Inadvertently, that we have under transfers, but really is a revenue source, and that is. We are transferring from the Cannabis Regulation Fund, $10 million. In FY 25, that was not supposed to happen until FY 26. But they're building up a substantial surplus there. So we're,
Yeah, the revenues seem to be coming in fairly strong, both
They do.
excise tax and sales tax.
they do. And so this, I mean, we're not. Their budget is 5.8 million. And the fees as well as the excise tax will more than cover that. By literally $10 million or more. So, we asked them for a conservative estimate of what they could spare. And they thought $10 million would be reasonable. There, to your point earlier, Madam Chair, there's the 10.688 transfer to the capital, the cash fund. And there is another slight oddity on the line below, the computer system modernization fund. Remember when you guys had changed the method of calculating the amount to go into that fund. It used to be from, for lack of a better term, I'll say found money from audit, tax audits of people. And they used to bring in somewhere around $50 to $60 million. That's maybe as they've gotten better at their job, there are fewer people who aren't paying as much as they owe. That number has gone down, and so,
We just said an amount rather than.
we said, yeah, it's, up to 0.21%. And that amount, the 0.21% is actually from the general fund, 3.8 million, and then from the education fund, I'm thinking
Oh, yeah,
1.2.
but they have to fund some of them.
But this year, again, to save a little bit of general fund, where instead of 3.8, that is 1.8, we're transferring from general fund, and we're transferring $2 million from the tax local option pilot fund. So that too is a one-time expenditure. If we're filling it.
We can't take money from the pilot.
So,
Take money from what?
The pilot fund.
yeah, there's a,
I didn't think we could. I thought that.
there's some notwithstanding language in there.
I
Well, there was kind of I mean, it's a tax fund, but,
understand, but it was,
and I would argue, we actually asked, I think, I'm gonna say 3 years ago or 2 years ago, to lower the amount that came to the state from that. Because we didn't need it to administer the program.
I know, and that, I don't know why. I
So
mean,
that's built up a surplus, so.
yeah, but we,
Look, you need every dime you can get, that I think is what we're seeing here.
I mean,
I understood, but it's wrong. We said when we started the darn thing, under Act 60 is the only thing I really understand.
The local option tax?
No, okay.
Oh,
Oh my God, we're on YouTube and I just said that. No,
Yeah.
that was a joke.
I think maybe, looking at our schedule,
but I
we're
think
going to
that-
finish and then we're gonna have to.
But
take
the local option tax, the 30% state fund was supposed to just be for administration. Understand that what's happening is how we're doing this, but I think I would hope that we as a legislature would look at lowering that amount. It should have done 3 or 4 years ago, but it's never. So that we're only maybe 20% or whatever necessary to administer the program. Sort of like a fee that's just for elevators. And we don't have as many elevators to inspect anymore, or we don't have as many elevator inspectors, and we use that fee to pay for something else.
Well,
Fire inspection.
And then that elevator in the state house goes slower and slower and slower.
I'm gonna suggest looking at the clock and the fact that we, have judiciary coming in. We have a 2-hour public hearing tonight. We take a brief break. We'll come back like in 10 minutes for the judiciary. I don't wanna keep the, judiciary waiting and then we'll break, until, our public hearing. And I don't know how many people are planning on coming down to the room. Andy, you coming down? I know Senator Sears,
I'm gonna go to bed.
he needs to rest. I don't know. Anyone planning on listening from here?
Well, is there room down there?
Yeah, there's plenty of room.
Is there Zoom link?
We'll just,
You could
We
zoom.
might Zoom from someplace. Okay.
Well,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
we're not gonna do a Zoom link from here, though.
Looks like it's up in the house.
Oh, it's on and,
It's in the house.
It's in the,
but it's in their appropriation.
yeah, it's in the
Remote.
appropriations room.
Yeah.
Where it was before. Thank you, Adam.
It's been fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. Did you go skiing this weekend?
I did.